listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. This is the show that talks about identity and access management and making sure you know who has access to what. Let's get started.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. May good luck go with you. Happy birthday to you.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
I'm doing great, man. This is July 1st. This is true dedication, us recording this podcast today, since we both had off from work. It's 5 p.m. Most people are having, at least their first beer of the day in celebration of it being Friday. But you and I, we're here recording a podcast.
Yeah. Well, we just spent the last 90 minutes catching up because it'd been a while for us to have any sort of substantive conversation. But yes, we are scrambling at the last minute yet again to get an episode out for next week. It is July 1st. It is 5 p.m. Eastern time. I will be editing this over the weekend as I build furniture and desks and things like that. So I'm on a makeshift sort of podcast center here that is absolutely not the way it should be happening, but it is the way that it is.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm also glad that you now live in Eastern Daylight or Eastern Standard Time along with me. And not that our time zone's any better than any other time zone, but since we're in the same time zone, there's not going to be confusion on, what time do you mean?
Yeah, no more math when it comes to
No more
scheduling.
math.
Which is nice, that's for sure. So yes, I have officially moved to North Carolina, which is great. I met my first black bear today in my yard, so that's something that I didn't have to worry about in the Chicago area. But woke up this morning, took the dogs out, and then just happened to notice a black bear out my window. And so that's North Carolina things.
Yeah, you showed me that the video from your camera. I mean, you should try to find some way, maybe post that onto our YouTube channel or something, so that people can see, like, this is a legit bear. This isn't like a teddy bear.
Yeah, I guess it seems like it's still like cub age, I guess, is what people around here describe it. So it's not a adult by far, but a bear's a bear. And the first time, I guess, that you come that close to one in the wild is an interesting experience for us Northerners. So it was interesting.
Well, if bears are like people, the adolescent years are usually the most trying. But from what I understand with bears, like, the last thing you want to do is get between a mother and her cub.
Yep.
That's when even a black bear could attack you. So
yeah,
there's a little bit of advice for you, Jeff.
Yeah, my plan is to let it do its thing, stay away. I think once we get the dogs outside, they will probably help with that, with barking and things like that. I don't think, most bears, I understand it, are not looking for a fight. So hopefully we will keep the peace around here and make sure that the garbage gets locked up tight so that we don't have any issues.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, you gotta be defensive of your garbage.
Yeah. I guess they like chicken, and it was in our yard as well because my wife hung a bird feeder, and I'm watching out the window right now. Squirrels were kind of playing underneath it. So it's like seeds, stuff like that, but she put peanuts up on it. And I guess the bear was interested in that. So there's one of the shots in the video of it reaching up, trying to get to this to this bird feeder that's just out of its reach before it kind of moseyed on about. But live on the side of a hill in the middle of sort of like a forest, and that's just something we're going to have to deal with. So it is what it is.
Well, you mentioned that they like chicken. So, and when we talked earlier, you mentioned that you found the fast food chain Bojangles. So my challenge to you would be, go get a bag of fried chicken from Bojangles and leave it on your porch.
Tribute.
If you want to see the bear again.
It's tribute for the bear. We got to come up with a name for the bear, I guess, if it's going to be coming around. So we can't just call it Bear. Got to have a good name.
Harry.
Any idea? Harry the bear?
He's very hairy.
Yeah, he is. What else do you want to talk about?
Well, it kind of feels like, we've got, both of us have so many life changes going on, but the one thing that is a staple in our lives, I guess I can mostly speak for myself, but we make sure we get an episode out every week, right?
Yep. Yep.
We've been doing that for a long time. About how long would you say it's been?
Today is our third birthday. So technically, I think we launched on like July 2nd, July 1st. So we're calling this our third birthday episode as it is. But yeah, it's this will be episode 153 over 3 years, which
It's
means
pretty
we're
amazing,
averaging,
man.
yeah, 50 a year, which is basically one a week. So and then some. So yeah, I guess congratulations to us.
Yeah. Good job, Jeff.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll keep it going. I think now that I've settled in my new spot, or at least starting to, I'll hopefully have a desk the next time that we record. We'll be able to start getting back into the groove with guests. I know we've been talking with a few different people and trying to get things lined up. I know that the episode that we recently did too around asking people, what is their definition of the difference between digital identity and access management. It took hold out there. It was kind of interesting to kind of hear some of the responses that we got, both when we were recording it from some of the folks that sent stuff in, but also then after the fact, people who listened to the episode and sent in stuff. So our guy for identity sent in a couple things. He sent one. He and I were talking over LinkedIn. He sent me a 2-minute recording of what he thought the definition was between the two before he listened to the episode. And then he listened to the episode and then he sent back a 4-minute thing. And we've got that queued up. We're probably not going to play it on this episode. I think, Jim, what you and I were thinking about is there were a couple people that wanted to submit last time that didn't get it in under deadline for us. So maybe we might do like a part 2. And I think that's probably the perfect opportunity to then play Alex's take on it, which I thought was interesting. And I feel like not to tease it, but I think where he ended up was where I ended up as well from a definition standpoint. But we'll just
Yeah, it
use
was
it as a
really
teaser for a
interesting.
future
And of
episode.
course, for those who know Alec from our past episodes or elsewhere, I mean, he's an Aussie. So his perspective is that of somebody who is from Australia.
Yeah.
Or, it's funny, so we're going to talk about this ISACA State of Security report, and they broke some things down by geography, and they referred to Australia, which I guess is Australia, New Zealand, and maybe some other places around there as Oceania.
Yep. Yeah, that's I was thinking is Oceania, that area. Is that the first time you've heard that term?
No, I've heard that term, but not very often. And I don't
Yeah.
even know if I'm pronouncing it properly.
I say it Oceania, but I'm sure somebody will correct me. The haters will come out in full force if we're not pronouncing it right, but we mean
That's right.
with all due respect, right? But yeah, it was interesting. I Alec, if you're listening, I personally like the football touch with it. I thought that was a great analogy. So yeah, we'll leave that there. You teased what we're going to talk about today, which is a white paper or report that you sent to me on email from ISACA. It's called The State of Cybersecurity 2022. Global Update on Workforce Efforts, Resources, and Cyber Operations, which is a mouthful for a name of a report. Why did you send this to me?
Yeah, so I've been working with several clients who are trying to build out parts and pieces of their cybersecurity, operations teams, or we follow kind of this plan, build, run methodology. You and I have always kind of used that that way of organizing as a framework for building an organization. But ultimately, wherever you are in the chain, from entry level all the way up to senior management, there's a challenge right now that is probably beyond anything we've seen, at least in a long time, in terms of finding talent, retaining talent. And so I did a little bit more research to have some facts and figures at hand to start to, help these information security leaders make an explanation or try to bring some facts to bear on like why it's so hard to find talent and why we have to do some things to be more competitive in not only finding talent, but I think retaining the talent that you have. That's if you lose one, that could be especially if it's a certain one within your group. It might take two people to make up for that. You might never be able to make up for it. So, retaining people by, knowing what are some of the key factors that are driving people to leave organizations, I think is important.
Yeah, losing one person might cause other dominoes to fall too, right? And sometimes that happens as a chain reaction. I think it's interesting that this report's kind of coming out. I don't want to say post pandemic, if that's what we're calling it at this point, but certainly the last couple of years has certainly shifted around expectations on both sides. And now that we are in this sort of like live with it, seems like a pandemic phase, there is there is certainly some. I don't know if tension is the right word, but certainly some issue where companies want their employees back in the office for whatever reason, and employees that were told for the last decade that they couldn't do their job remotely found out in the last 2 years that they absolutely could. I think that has been a real challenge for employers who have stuck with that mindset of no, we want people back in the office. Is they are really struggling trying to find resources to come in and then retain them. If they're there now and there is an opportunity to do the same work and maybe get a pay bump, or maybe you miss the same pay but you can work remote, workers are choosing the more flexible option, which is personally what I would choose as well. But it's been interesting these last couple of years to see. It just drives me crazy. All these years is like, yeah, you could do this job remotely, and like, why are we not allowed to work from home more often? Pandemic hits, validates that to a large degree for a large number of folks, and here we are, people trying to go back in the office. And I think the future is more of this, I don't know, hybrid or flexible, whatever spin an organization wants to put on it. There are certainly some people who like going into the office, and maybe it makes sense for certain things. But I think that's been an interesting turnaround here is what happens now, people going back into the office, and how do you retain talent, especially in an area like cybersecurity that is so cutthroat, and it is very competitive, and it's also hard to find those people. And you want to keep them engaged too.
Right. Yeah, I think that those are all great points. You and I have been working from home for many years prior to the pandemic. We've always kind of been able to get the job done, but a lot of our clients were, in the office focused, and we'd go out and we definitely took advantage of the fact of having people in a room. The level of engagement, the type of meetings that you have are different, right? I think we did a great job of, trying to have the same level of quality of meetings when everybody's connecting remotely. I think turning on your camera really makes a big difference. Um, but I wanted to, because what you're bringing up is kind of one of the areas that you talked about in this report. And one of the thoughts that I had as I was reading it is, we have a potential for, I mean, we're going to have a major societal shift if the majority of companies don't go back into the office, because a lot of businesses are built around, hey, a bunch of people show up at this one place for business every day. So restaurants depend on those people, and skyscrapers were built to house those people, and gyms were built. And now if, hardly anybody goes there, if the company that was renting that high rise, all those other businesses start to go out of business, well, that's going to displace a lot of people. What does that mean from a society standpoint? And do we have to go through some kind of major economic disruption like we did with the housing crisis, right? Because we could have a residential real estate crisis as well. If, and I think the reason that hasn't happened already is that companies sign long-term leases. Oh yeah, we'll stay in this high rise for 10 years at this rental rate. So they don't have the ability to just say, all right, forget this. We're working from home fine. So we're going to shift to that. Now, what could happen in that time period is that we find kind of a new norm and it's somewhere in between, or we could see kind of a movement either way. They're bring everybody back in, things go back to quote unquote normal. I I kind of feel like we won't get back to normal completely because people realize that there's a value to them in working remotely. They're going to favor the remote type jobs where possible, and they will wind up leaving companies that force them to go back in the office, and companies can't afford to lose all of their talent.
Yeah, the ability to work remotely is certainly a major benefit for some organizations to be able to attract talent. It's just the way it is. Um, yeah, I don't have any more to add to that part. I think remote's here to stay. I think it'll be interesting to see what the dynamic is for this flexible model or this hybrid model, whatever it ends up being. But I certainly don't see anytime soon sort of the massive shift back to, hey, let's get 10,000 of our employees all into the office again, and which means smaller footprints for buildings. So maybe there is more, flexibility now from a physical footprint or physical office perspective, or maybe it's more shared workspaces or open concept type things versus having, assigned seats, right? Things like that, more of a hotel environment, which I think was already starting to be sort of the norm anyway. But, it might be that people pull back their investments on the real estate side. They don't need 100% of that space anymore. Maybe they only need 50% of it.
Yeah.
And it will certainly impact businesses around it for sure. We saw it during the pandemic. We saw, was it Predamanger? I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Had some issues. They're a big kind of urban, in the city lunch, breakfast type place. And I think they certainly struggled through the pandemic. And I'm not even sure if they're still open at this point. But stuff like that, you're totally right. There's this trickle down effect. Now, what could happen though is it might free up more real estate for smaller shops that don't need those massive spaces, and maybe you end up with more of a variety of businesses in a building versus one building with two or three dominant tenants, right? That sort of thing. I feel like now we're getting into real estate, and I'm not sure where this is going from a cybersecurity or more specifically an identity perspective. But I think really what we're talking about is how hard is it to attract and retain talent, and certainly this remote work is a big part of both attracting and retention.
So I kind of feel like in the information security industry, we're a little bit spoiled from the perspective that, there's a lot more demand for talent than there is talent that exists, right? So, even in a kind of an economic downturn, we see that there's still going to be a demand for information security people. And this hasn't always been the case, but it's definitely one of the findings in the report was that 63% of survey respondents, so people who work for organizations, claim that their organization has unfilled cybersecurity positions, which represents an 8 percentage point increase from last year. So I think the demand is growing, but the pool of professionals isn't growing fast enough to keep up with it.
Yeah, demand and supply, right? I think there's always been a shortage of information security, cybersecurity workers. I think identity is a nice microcosm of that. You can never find enough good identity people, it seems like. And the good ones are taken and heavily courted, and and you try to keep them when you hang on to them. So it doesn't surprise me. I guess what I find a little surprising though is that there hasn't been as much, at least from what I've seen publicly, more of a focus on making cybersecurity in general a career. I know that you and I have talked about it from the identity side of things and trying to attract more talent into the identity space. And there certainly are other folks out there that have certainly contributed to that as well. But it seems like it just continues to grow and grow and grow, and we're still chasing, the equilibrium point, I guess, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I think the other aspect of it is, part of why I think there are so many unfilled cybersecurity positions is that when people leave, they can't leave those positions unfilled anymore. They either, have to bring in consulting to fill the gap. Consulting is generally much more expensive, especially when you have a scenario where, hey, this is a full-time role. We need, 40, 50 hours a week of somebody doing this to go out and, pay several $100s an hour. That's not always feasible. So they open those jobs up, those job recs right away. A lot of that is, again, people leaving their jobs. So one of the factoids in this report were why cybersec pros leave their jobs. So 59% recruited by other companies. So I think this is something that feeds on itself. Is like, hey, now we have an opening. We're going to try and go steal somebody from another company, right? It's not like there's a bunch of people are unemployed looking for jobs. So it's being recruited away. And then the second one, 48%, poor financial incentives. So, in other words, people are chasing after more money, which makes sense. Like, look, in this environment, I think it's not just the US problem, but around the world, we have an inflationary environment. Everything costs more. The groceries, putting gas in your car, rents are going up. Um, so people need more money. They're going to chase after that money. But it's not only that, right? I think that's one thing that well, I'd referenced this report, and we're not going to go through every item, but the next one was limited promotion and development opportunities. I think, especially if you have somebody who even cares about that, cares about, making advancements in their career, you have to make sure that they have those opportunities, because people who care about those things are probably the people that you want to keep in the organization. They're ambitious. They have a desire to do more.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it is, if you work for an organization, you find yourself being capped as far as how high you can go, what's your next move? Is you have to look elsewhere if that's what you want to do. That happened to me early on in my career. I hit a certain point where I was not going to be able to be promoted at that time into the role that I wanted. And that caused me to look elsewhere and, find a way around that. And sure, moving to another company, there was a nice pay raise and that kind of thing comes along with it. But the reason that I started looking in the first place was because I hit a wall as far as how high I was going to be able to go with that particular organization, which sucked because I liked it. It was a great organization, and still friends with people there today. But it is what it is. But that's where then the recruitment from other companies comes in, and I feel like that's the domino that falls. So let's say so and so moves to a different organization and they've got good relationships. What does that one person do now? Is they reach out to their network and say, "Hey, come over here. It's great." Or, "Hey, I'm building something. Come be part of it." Right? That sort of thing. And now that original company is losing not just the original person that they couldn't retain. Now they're losing 2, 3, 4, 10, 100, whatever it looks like, right? For people to come along with that. And generally, when you shift from one company to another, that's when you get a pay raise, which is unfortunate that organizations don't seem to want to raise, salaries or provide the financial incentives to keep people until it's too late, right? I think
Yeah.
everyone that's listening is probably familiar with a counter offer. In an ideal world, it never even got to a counter offer status, right? It was, you were paid fairly, you felt you were competitive. There were regular reviews to make sure that financial component was competitive with what the market is paying. And there should be far fewer of those counter situations. But I think what a lot of companies fall into now is they have their pre-built, here's what the salary is for this title and this range, and there's I forget what the name of it is, but basically, you're put into a bucket, and the only way that you get a raise is if you get promoted. And then maybe some people get promoted that probably shouldn't be because
Yeah.
of the financial aspect, or vice versa, whatever it may be. And that, instead of sort of tweaking that and making that more flexible, is they then wait and then, oh, okay, here's a counter. And I think the science that I've read on the counter situation is that it doesn't work out for either party after 2 years. It might feel good in the short term, but it strategically, it's generally not the right move.
Yeah.
So if you're a worker, how do you go and get a raise?
I'm
You go and
familiar
find a
with
new
what you're
company.
talking about with that
Yeah.
salary survey mentality, which is,
Yeah.
hey, think of it this way. If you get a 12% increase and you didn't even ask for it, that means you were underpaid pretty significantly. And you
Yeah.
showed up on
Bands and
some report.
clusters. That's what it was called. Bands and clusters. But yeah, it's like every role is slotted into a band or a cluster. And yeah, you're totally right. If you're getting a higher raise, you're probably being underpaid to begin with.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we're kind of exposing here is just there's two ways to look at it. One is, this all is great as individuals who are marketing and selling our time back to companies in terms of, hey, salaries are going up. All this news that we're going over, in this report, as people who have to build teams of cybersecurity professionals, is like, oh, wow, this is probably a more challenging environment to build and retain a team than it's ever been.
Yeah, I'm in that right now, right? I mean, I'm building an organization, and it is absolutely a realistic concern to say, okay, what's my budget going to be? I think cost of living has gone up, which is driving up salary demands, et cetera. I mean, I'm sure other folks who are in the hiring, side of things for their organizations are feeling it as well. It just keeps going up and up. At some point, there's going to be a slowdown or a bubble or whatever we want to call it, where it becomes almost untenable to be able to continue doing that without business continuing to grow. When you combine that with current state of economy and people starting maybe to pull back on spend, especially in the business world, right? And that means that there is less dollars out there, makes it even more competitive, maybe on the consulting side or other services that are out there. Makes it more difficult then to say, okay, can we actually afford these salaries that are being paid? I think that feeds absolutely into some of the gaps that are out there. Is there are probably people out there who would be a perfect fit for the job, but they are too expensive for the role, and they're not getting the offer. Or it could be also that they may have a inflated self of sense of self worth, where they think they're worth more than they maybe really are. Right? That's certainly a possibility as well.
It does happen. So one of the other findings here was around university degrees being required. In general, it says the trend to require a university degree for entry-level cybersecurity positions is reversing. A smaller percentage of enterprises are requiring university degrees, which I think makes a lot of sense, right? Because especially for a lot of the technical roles, I think certifications hit the nail on the head better, especially in like the more technical roles. I think though, one of the other topics that we want to get into is around like skills gaps and where those skills gaps exist. And a big emphasis in this report was on soft skills, which I think are something where people can develop them more in that university environment. But um, obviously, I think the university environment is not the only place that you can develop any kind of skill. But I think from a, cybersec technology, and, setting some kind of boundary like, hey, you have to have this degree or a degree, just limits your ability to, I think what we're all trying to do is we're trying to find undervalued resources, right? So, nobody wants to buy at the top of the market. Nobody wants to get a poor value. But if you can find that gold nugget, and maybe it's just that, you found somebody that other companies have rejected because they don't have the university degree. Potentially you're going to land on a fantastic value. What are your thoughts?
I'm happy to see that there is less of a requirement for a university degree. I don't have one. I'm self-taught. It took me a long time to get where I am, but I'm happy to see that. I think, I think we've seen it for the last few years is, degree in X or equivalent work experience has sort of been the standard, I would say, for like the last 10 years or so. And it's getting better and better all the time. I would much rather hire a smart person with a great attitude that doesn't have a degree than a smart person with a great attitude or with a poor attitude that does have a degree.
Yeah. Well, you always got to remember Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates,
Yeah.
college
Jeff Stedman.
dropouts, right?
I have an economics degree or an economics credit to my credit, I guess.
So the next one was skills gap. So it was as for skills gap among recent university graduates, the survey responses highlight soft skills again this year as the area of greatest concern. So from a soft skills perspective, communication skills, both listening and speaking, is the top soft skills security professionals need in their organizations, according to 57% of respondents. And so the reason I wanted to bring that up is I feel like we've talked so much about this in past episodes or over the course of the Identity at the Center saga, which is that what makes a good IAM program manager? It's that, I think we always go back to your definition, which is shaking hands and kissing babies. It's you've got to be able to relate to people. You've got to be able to then not only do that, but be able to speak publicly. You need to be able to write clearly. You need to be an effective communicator. Now, I don't think that college is the only way to get there, but I do think that if you're listening to the show and you're deciding whether or not to go to college, don't take this as you shouldn't go to
Yep.
college.
Go to school. Go to school.
Go
I'm
to
telling you
school.
right now. Go to school.
Get that under your belt. But, don't think that, okay, if I'm just like a tech wizard, that's all that matters, because it's these soft skills that, have been highlighted as something that is very important. As far as technology skills, the number one InfoSec technology skill gap that was highlighted was cloud computing. And I think that's, to me, the reason why that one makes sense to be at the very top is that cloud computing is kind of a relatively newer thing. It's not that, hey, we just found out about the cloud, but it's really picked up steam in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean it's the I don't know what the technology du jour, right? Everyone's moving to the cloud, so of course people want cloud resources, and I think if you have a specific affinity towards AWS or Azure or Google or maybe other niche kind of ones at this point, um, those are in demand and valuable skills. I know that they are always in demand for organizations that are looking to enhance their cloud footprint. Doesn't necessarily have to be identity. It could be security. It could be development, whatever it may be. But I'm not. I'm told. I'm not. I'm definitely not surprised that cloud is number one. We're hearing it from our customers too, right? Is hey, do you have somebody who knows AWS IAM? The challenge becomes do you have somebody who knows AWS and Google and Azure, right? It's unicorns who are multifaceted, multi-skilled across different technologies. I think that's where the biggest gap right now is it's not necessarily hey, we're looking for somebody who can, write a project plan. It's hey, we need somebody who's a SailPoint developer or who's someone who knows how to roll out Savient or someone who knows how to implement, X specific tool in X specific environment. Now it's become a lot more of that type of situation versus maybe more of a generalized, oh, I need an identity person. Okay, well, what's your platform? What are you looking to do? There's far more to it than now just, give me an identity person. It's
Right.
what type of identity person do you need? I think that's what challenge comes in. But I think that's also where the soft skills help as well is, you got to be able to engage, convince, attract, people to, the cause of identity. And those are important skills and not everyone has them. Some people need to develop them. Some people, will become great at it. Some people start great at it. And some people just, that's not their thing. And that's cool too. I think that's part of the reason why, there's plenty of room in the identity space for both technical and non-technical. But I think based on what I saw in this report, it seems like the deep technical tool specific people are the ones that have the largest number of, open requisitions out there for jobs.
Yeah. I mean, and as you're kind of describing that to me is, I'm also thinking like all the stuff, everything you need to know about this is out there on YouTube. You can learn it all on YouTube, and then you can go into a free AWS or Azure environment and practice it. And so, there's really no reason why it should be so hard to find resources who know this stuff. But I mean, then obviously you got to get some real world job experience. And
I don't think it's finding the resources. I think it's finding the time to do it. Because a lot of folks this isn't their day job, right? They might be working on something else. Do you or does your organization set aside time for you to actually get smarter? I think that's important. I think that was one of the things I saw as sort of like one of the retention things, is people are looking for things like certification reimbursements. I don't think it's, for the most part, people are unwilling to get smarter, faster, stronger, right? Whatever it is, sharpen the saw, as you like to say. I think they're not given sometimes the time to be able to do that. These things take time to do. Do you get 2 weeks off that are yours where you're not being pinged, every 2 seconds on Teams that you can actually devote to that sort of training? I think that's an important aspect too.
yeah, I mean, one of my pet peeves since my early days in IT were people who's like would say, "Oh, well, nobody sent me to training for that." Like, oh, well, then how would you possibly know anything about that if someone didn't send you to training, let you leave work for 2 weeks and pay for some class? Folks, there's books. You can set up a computer at home. You can watch YouTube videos. And I know it sounds a little bit crass, but I mean, this is your career. If you're not going to invest in yourself, why would somebody else invest in you? And it might be nice that other folks are getting sent to trainings. I've been sent to trainings, but the stuff I really know, like TCP/IP networking, I didn't go to classes for that. It's like I read until I understood it, and I asked people who knew way more about it to try to explain it to me and how they thought about it. And I know I'm like dating myself with some of those comments, but those are some of the fundamentals that even came through in this survey report. Was like one of the technical skills that was close behind cloud computing was understanding networks. And it's like that used to be a fundamental, like a fundamental building block. And now I kind of understand why it's not, because so much of it is kind of glossed over and people don't actually have to set up networks or troubleshoot networking equipment, just expect it to work. But that's, ultimately, I guess what I'm getting at is that you've got to, if you want to move up and build your skill set, you can't wait for somebody else to send you to class. You've got to give up some of your free time and like invest in yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there needs more balance. I think if people need to actively manage their careers for sure, which means managing your own knowledge and capability as well. But at the same time, if an organization is going out and hiring somebody, let's say, I'll pick on SailPoint again. If they're looking to go hire a SailPoint engineer. They have a perfectly good, capable individual, in house. Consider training up your own team, right? The people you've got. I think there's a lot of added value there. I think it helps everybody, right? I think that's one of the things that will help the organization from a retention standpoint. I think it helps you become more um, strategic when it comes to making sure you've got the right people selected in place. But yeah, I agree. People need to manage their time effectively. But I think that it does need to be a 2 weeks, I could talk today, two-way street. Because what ends up happening is, a lot of people go on vacation, but it's not really vacation. The work didn't stop. The email still continued to come in. You still get pinged on any number of, text channels, regardless of whether or not you're quote unquote in the office. The work did not stop. It just piled up, and you've shifted the work from 1 week to the next, or one day to the next, or whatever it may be. And I think that's always a challenge. Is when a lot of people, they come back from vacation, it's like, they're swamped, or a lot of people just choose to work on vacation because they know if they don't, they're just going to be behind when they get back. So where is that balance of being able to set aside time is a challenge for everybody, I'm sure. But I think, it's just something that we've got to do better. I think from a management aspect of things is to give our people enough time to breathe and not just be jamming project after project after project and not giving any time to have that balance there.
That's right.
Soapbox. There we go.
So, one other thing that was in the report was something which I thought was interesting. Again, so I'm trying to pull out some of the tidbits in case people don't go and read the report themselves, which you can't read every report. But this one had another good point, which is that 6 in 10 respondents named security controls as one of the areas of training most needed by security staff. And so I think what this is getting at is understanding the big picture of how information security applies to the organization. So, information security teams will work with a framework which has controls. Controls will have a business objective, and then they'll outline how that control is achieved. And then it's the technology underneath of it that makes that control achievable. And it's that technology that gets tested as part of an audit. And I think when I read that, I kind of thought to myself, like, the training that they're saying people need is, especially if they're, very dedicated to one piece of technology, or they're doing some technical work toward, um, the information security landscape, is to see how that fits into the big picture of, you know, these controls, like a GRC framework for achieving these objectives through the technology. So, um, what what am I getting at with all that? Is that, even if you are, focused on something that's more narrow, or you don't understand that big picture, that's what these survey respondents, which are people from all different levels, are saying. That's what we want to see: people that have good they have obviously good technology skills, but they also have good soft skills to communicate and understand what they're doing and how it relates to the business, how it provides value to the business, how it fits into the big picture. If you don't know those things, start start networking with some of the more senior people, like maybe your chief information security officer or some other senior managers who are approachable. Ask them if you can go to lunch, ask them if you can just, like, you know, ask them to explain some of what they do. I think, if that person is like me, they'd be more than happy to take somebody and, explain those things to them, because, I mean, heck, um, it's our ability to kind of pass on, hey, somebody's interested in what I know. I'd be more than happy to pass that information on to them. So I think if you're in that kind of situation, that's one way to kind of build your career.
Yeah, take an interest in how the business operates. I think that's always helpful, right? And I think that's something that on the consulting side that I try to do is understand, okay, how does this business make money? Because that's where the identity controls are going to come in and say, okay, what do we need to solve for, right? And how do we prioritize, and how do we make sure that the user experience, whether it's internal or external or whatever it may be, is where it needs to be, so that the business can continue to be profitable. And if you know that kind of stuff, you can become your own unicorn, so to speak, and just drive that much more value out of it.
All right, so I want to pull out this one Easter egg that I found in this report, or maybe it's not an Easter egg, but I just found it, like, to be almost humorous. So it was titled "An Abundance of Confidence." Survey respondents' confidence in the ability of their cybersecurity teams to detect and respond to cyber threats reaches at an all-time high of 82%, a 5 percentage point increase from last year. This confidence is remarkable, considering that 46% of respondent enterprises have a security staff of just 2 to 10 individuals. So, in my mind, this was like, they walk up to a server and it says, "Your server has been ransomware." And it's like, I just detected we've been ransomware.
Good job.
Good job. And I'm going to
Yeah,
respond by taking a job somewhere else.
yeah. I think it's interesting that confidence level. I think it's good. Is getting better. I still think the other research that we tend to look at also shows that it's taking sometimes 6 months to even identify when you've been breached. So I guess, are you confident that they're finding them, I guess, before that average of 6 months or whatever it may be? I mean, I was talking with an organization earlier this week, and they were hesitant about having tools even touching their Active Directory for fear of breaking it. It's like, okay, I get that, but who's going to spend more money on securing things? A company that's not their bread and butter and that's not what they do, or a company that's what they do, that is their bread and butter. And I
Yeah.
think some of that mindset shift needs to start happening. There's kingdoms sort of being built up. It's like, okay, well, we would catch it. We would know. Would you? What if you're the threat? If you get breached, or if you're thinking about it from an insider threat perspective, that's putting an awful lot of trust into those 2 to 10 people to be, that vigilant and being able to detect that stuff.
I mean, you do see that at some companies. There are fiefdoms. There are areas where people justify, hey, we're going to keep all of our data on servers that we built here because whatever XYZ reasons is, in other words, justifying their existence. You do see that sometimes. What I see more often though is organizations they realize that the amount of work compared to the amount of staff and the amount of budget they have no way of keeping up. That's why I think it's not that I don't think that there should be some confidence out there for many organizations, but when I hear 82%, like that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous because I think the two factors are knowing when the breach took place and then knowing the extent of the breach. And I don't think organizations are, in general, well prepared for that.
Yeah, still reactive, I think. Too much so, unfortunately. But I guess if we want to make a bright side is it's getting better, I guess, it seems. Maybe slowly but surely.
Yeah, I mean, you know what it is? It's like there's a competition between the organizations trying to protect their data and the bad guys trying to steal their data. And they're both getting better. And so what you have to do is you have to get better at a faster pace than the bad guys.
Or run
Otherwise,
faster
you're
than your
getting
friends.
worse. Yeah, you, you know, there's like one of those haunted Halloween kind of things where it's like, zombies are in the house and you walk through with your friends and they have a sign like a billboard that says "Bring slow friends."
I like that. It's true, sadly, but yeah. All right, so we've been talking about this report for, I don't know, 45 minutes or so. Anything else you want to pull out from it before we start to wrap things up?
Isn't that crazy how we could take something that it's just like, probably takes a half hour to read and we can talk about it for 45 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it certainly helps us on a audio podcast, that's for sure.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, why don't we go ahead and start to wrap it up? I know we normally go on a lighter note, but when I was typing up notes for this show ahead of time, I was a little bit of a negative mood. So I wanted to ask you, Jim, if there's anything that you want to vent about. It can be important, it could be a first world problem, whatever you want. Let's get it off our chests to
Jeff,
end the
you've
week.
known me for how many years? Has there ever
8?
not been something I want to vent about? I always have something I want to vent about.
Yeah, I mean, I think and it's normal, right? I mean, there's frustrations in life. I think what I feel like I've personally gotten better is understanding what is a truly mission critical problem versus, okay, that's an annoyance. It is a first world problem, as I like to put it. I don't have to worry about it. I'm okay. But those things can add up over time.
Yeah, and they can make you angry. And so, yeah, I've got one that happened to me today. So just a reminder, we're recording on Friday, July 1st. Monday, July 4th is a U.S. holiday called Independence Day. A lot of places are closed today. And that's fine. I understand that. And I want everybody to be able to have their free time and time with their family, whatever. But today, being that I had off, I tried to deal with an insurance issue, a health insurance issue, which has been a nagging thing where I'm getting a bill. And for some reason, my insurance company has been rejecting it according to the provider. I don't think it's ever been getting to my insurance company, but I decided to call my insurance company. And of course, I end up on an automated system and I hit this option, I hit that option, I provide information, I respond in voice. And finally, they say, we're going to now connect you to a human being. Thank goodness. And about 10 seconds later, they say, sorry, there's no attendants available to help you because we're closed for the holiday. This is after sitting on the system for like 10 minutes. I'm like, why didn't you just start out by saying, we will be closed from Friday to Monday or something like that? I would have hung up immediately and called back on Tuesday. Anyway, that's super frustrating.
Yeah, and I think that's a good first world problem. I mean, it's not good to have it, but I think it's a good example of one. Mine is definitely another first world problem. Actually, I have 2. Can I have 2? You're nodding at me on camera. Okay. So my first one is So I just moved to North Carolina from the Chicago area. I am a United customer. That's kind of been my airline of choice for the last several years. For good or for bad, they've been fine for me. No big deal. But now that I'm in North Carolina, not necessarily United hub area. So I've been looking at different airlines to try to switch over. And I was like, okay, well, seems like American Airlines is going to have to be the choice because just the sheer volume of flights leaving from my local airport here. I must have spent 90 minutes on different phone trees trying to find a live person to talk to get signed up for the American Airlines Admiral Club credit card, whatever it may be, right? To kind of get that started as I start my new flight journey. 90 minutes to find a live person. I kept getting bounced around between different phone numbers with phone trees that linked the other phone trees. And I got to tell you, I got so fed up with it that I just went to Delta, and they made it easy, and I was in and I was done with it.
I didn't realize that we were going to talk about American Airlines because, I mean, if we did this, do we have any rants every week? I bet half of my rants would have been about American Airlines. I can't stand them. So, I mean,
Well, I think we all have our favorite and less favorite vendors, but this is a situation where the company made it so difficult for me to give them money that I took my money elsewhere, and we'll give Delta a shot, I guess, in absence of that. But
you'll be
that's
happy
one.
you did.
I hope so. I mean, again, first world problem. My other first world problem is, me and my electric cars, right? You know how much I love them. And I have a Tesla, which is great. I just got a Model Y Performance, which is awesome. I love it. Traded in my Model 3 for it. Very cool. For people who don't know, we went fully electric at the beginning of this year. I guess it would have been December, technically, of 2021. So we have 2 electric vehicles. We have the Tesla, and then we also have a Volvo XC40. We've had the gas version of the XC40 for, I don't know, the last 4 or 5 years, I think. I've been very happy. Fantastic vehicle. No issues there. But I got to tell you, man, this Volvo XC40 Recharge has been one of the worst vehicles I've ever had. Just from a sheer reliability standpoint, it has been like nothing but problems with this thing. And it made my drive down from Chicago to my new home in North Carolina that much more difficult because of software and hardware issues that Volvo just can't seem to solve and keep saying, oh, it's in the next thing. It's in the next thing, the next thing. So I hate to put Volvo on blast, but seriously, get your what together because when it works, it's a great vehicle. But I shouldn't have to say when it works. That is not what we're looking for, especially right now in such a competitive EV market. It's been a real mess, and I literally can't wait for them to take the vehicle back, and I'm actually in the process of trying to get them to buy it back for me. That's how much this vehicle has been a pain in the ass for me.
Well, I think that's what happened to American car companies in whatever the 80s, was that the Japanese cars took over the market because they were just so much more reliable. And the American cars were breaking down a lot. And I think that forced the American cars to get better. So maybe that's what Tesla's doing, is like they're setting the gold standard, and everybody just realized they're going to have to get to that level or forget about it.
I mean, I'm not going to say Tesla's perfect, right? There's still issues that come out with that, but it's been a night and day experience between the 2 vehicles. And the Volvo XC40 Recharge uses Google Automotive as its OS, which when it works is pretty cool. It works fine, but again, shouldn't be when it works. I shouldn't have to break into the vehicle because the key fobs don't work, set off the alarm, and then try to figure out where the backup key reader is, let the alarm continue going off, only to find out that the GPS doesn't work. The LTE data connection doesn't work, which are super important for an electrical vehicle to know where you are and where you're going to get your next charge from. So it's been a mess, for 6 months now that I've had it. And the EV market is just too competitive. There's too many good EV vehicles. So I really hope someone from Volvo hears this. Not that they will. This is Identity at the Center. But for other folks who are looking at Volvo XC40 recharges, my experience has been less than stellar. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Rant over. I'm done.
Hashtag rant or
Yeah, exactly.
/rant. Um, I just, sometimes you say something and you just feel like you need to clarify. So when I say I hate American Airlines, I don't hate people from American Airlines, right? I'm not a hater. I'm not a hateful person, but
Yeah, if
I've
you want
had
to
a lot
sponsor
of
us, we'll take you. We're gonna lose
I've,
that American Airlines money, sponsorship money.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, where I'm going is like, look, I know everybody's out there trying to do their best job, but my what has happened to me is I got stranded at Charlotte Airport like 4 business trips in a row, and that was when I just said, "I'm done."
It's all it takes. You
It's all
have
it
a couple bad
takes.
experiences, and you start to see a trend. I like to think I'm pretty tolerant, but you have to certain amount of point. You kind of have to understand if whether or not you're a captive audience, and if you're not, there's choices out there. It's very similar to what we just talked about from the cybersecurity state, right? Of hiring and retaining and talent and things like that are out there. Is if there is a better product out there or a better company that is a better fit for an individual, they are going to go to that company. So, how do you make sure that your company or your organization is set up in a way to retain as many of those people as possible?
Yeah. I think that on an individual level for the retention, this would be my parting thought. Is you've got to treat people with respect. And sometimes it's going to be, you know, hearing people out, giving them advice, putting their interests, taking their interests to heart. It might require more patience on your end than you really feel like you should have to have. But I don't know. I mean, like, there's a team that was working for me recently that I felt like, I have to go that extra mile to make sure that these folks feel cared for and that, they're being listened to and I'm taking their best interests at heart. I think that adds up over time. I think one of the biggest things, it didn't show up on this report, or at least I didn't see it on the report. Biggest things about where you work is who you work with. And if you really enjoy working with the people, then you're much more likely to stay there. Right now, that doesn't mean that you could be 50% underpaid and still feel good, but all other things being roughly equal, I think the people that you work with is like the number one factor. At least it is for me.
I think people put up with a lot more if they're surrounded by people that they like. I think that's natural. I think there's also been statements out there as like people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. I think there's some truth to that as well. I think it's a combination of everything. But yeah, I mean, it's not hard. Be cool. you know,
Yeah.
give people rope when they need it. Be careful of of that kind of stuff, and hopefully, I guess just treat people the right way. And that's it. I feel like this episode was much different than what we normally get into, getting really an identity, but more of like I guess the business side of talent. And we talked a lot about cybersecurity, but this is definitely an identity area as well. So
It's
um,
such a hot area right now that it's on so many people's minds. I mean, look, we're starting to line up when we have guests back on the show. And it's, we've thrown a few in there and, look, we love doing that, but that takes a lot of extra preparation. And most people wouldn't want to record on Friday night before a 4-day weekend, right? So,
except
um,
us losers.
us losers, yeah. Well, I think,
But I still think topics like this are important to cover because it's not all technical. There's plenty of technical content out there. I think sometimes these conversations get into the soft skill area, right? Understanding maybe the stuff that, if you haven't maybe been in the professional life for as long, maybe it helps put some context out there. Here's what people who have been in it for a while are thinking or what they're seeing, right? Those sorts of things. So I'm not opposed to it. Obviously, we did a whole show around it, but I did think it was pretty different than what we normally would get into,
yeah,
which is cool.
I
I
think
like it. Keeps it different.
it does. And I think the topic was relevant to the person who's managing a team is also relevant to the person who's just getting into the field and everything in between.
Absolutely. All right. We went for an hour on our third birthday. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Happy birthday, Jim. Here's to another 3 years.
Happy
Hopefully
birthday,
we can-
Jeff.
hopefully we can continue this breakneck pace of a show a week. I think I'm going to end up being a Gartner in roughly a month and a half or so. So maybe I'll be able to see you there.
Fist
Maybe we
bump.
can actually do something, live with some folks. So if you're going to be a Gartner, ping Jim or I, and we'd be happy to see what we can do about maybe doing a recording or a fist bump, or even just shooting the proverbial what. So all right, we'll go ahead and leave it there for this week as Jim laughs at me on camera. It's late on a Friday. Let's be done with this. You can visit the show on the web, identityattthecenter.com. We're on Twitter at IDAC Podcast. Maybe I'll post a picture of the bear on there. And with that, we'll go ahead and leave it. So thanks, everyone, for listening. And thanks for being with us for these last 3 years. And hopefully you'll stick around with us. And we'll talk with everyone in the next one. Thanks for listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and visit us on the web at identityattthecenter.com.